June 1998. Still working at Frame Art, of course, in Woodmere, Ohio. Uh, Long drive, but I love the job. I like the people I work with. I think somewhere around here is when Jane has left. She moved away. So that was the end. We did not stay in touch. Um, she was, she took, she took this box that I had some games in. I had this X Files card game, and I had laminated some pieces, made it real nice, and she took it with her. I was most upset about that, but that's that. Not really much more to say about Jane. That's all over. But her influence is felt one more time in this list of the books that I read in June of 1998. Not quite yet. The first book is The Still by David Feintuck, and this is about Rodrigo, the Prince of, I have this written down, Prince of Caledon. This is a fantasy novel, and the queen dies, and Rodrigo thinks he's going to take the throne, become the king, but his uncle usurps the throne and kicks Rodrigo out of the kingdom along with his best friend and a cousin or something. And so Rodrigo has to prove himself worthy, and there's this magical thing called the Still that gives its power to the rightful king. And so he has to prove that he's the rightful king. I loved the Seafort Saga, the sci-fi, military sci-fi-ish series by David Feintuck. Absolutely loved that. This was fine. I believe there's a second book in the series. I don't recall if I ever actually read it, because this was just, it was okay, but it certainly, in my opinion, did not live up to the standards of the Seafort Saga. And that's it. That's that. Next up, we have Blood Trail by Tanya Huff. Part of her Blood series, featuring Vicki Nelson. But in this book, there's a community of werewolves. It's up in Canada, and someone starts killing off these werewolves. And so the werewolves go to, let me check his name. Where is it? Henry Fitzroy, who's a vampire, and he writes romance novels. But they go to him to see if he can help figure out who's killing them. Henry Fitzroy goes to Vicki Nelson, who's a cop, who's losing her eyesight, if I remember correctly. She's going blind. And so the vampire and the cop have to help the werewolves. It's a fun series for, what do they call it, urban fantasy. But we'll see more of Tanya Huff coming up. Not this month, eventually, in other videos. All right, so the last book that I read because of Jane, I believe, this is absolutely something that Jane recommended, this author. The book is Brightness Falls from the Air by James Tiptree Jr. And James Tiptree Jr. is actually Alice Bradley Sheldon. But apparently, back in the day, this is, she was writing science fiction in the 60s, I think, and felt that publishing under a male name would be better for her career. Again, apparently, that was somewhat true. I was reading some things, and it said that a lot of the male authors that she was corresponding with, when they found out that they were talking to a woman, they ghosted her, to use a more modern term than was used back then. But anyway, Brightness Falls from the Air. Didn't remember anything about it. I thought this was a short story collection, because I believe I read a short story collection from James Tiptree Jr., but this is actually a novel. and it has something to do with there's 16 humans that go to this planet to watch an artificial nova, and then it's a murder mystery, something. Um, Obviously, not something that stuck with me. I remember enjoying the short story collection that I read, but I don't know. I don't remember my feelings. Don't remember this book at all. But there you go. But James Tiptree Jr. When I was looking up the writing, the author, um, a lot of the things I looked at said that she only wrote 2 novels, then a bunch of short stories, and a lot of people said that her short stories were much better than her novels. All right, then we have X-Men: The Jewels of Cyttorak. Not sure how you pronounce that, by Dean Wesley Smith, and this is uh, the Juggernaut, who's a character who's not a mutant. The Juggernaut is this unstoppable. When he starts moving, nothing can stop him. He'll run through anything, and he gets his powers from this crystal. I forget what it's called, from Cyttorak, or however you pronounce it. But his powers come from this jewel, or this crystal. So in the X-Men: The Jewels of Cyttorak, this another jewel from Cyttorak, which is another dimension, I believe. This other jewel appears, and so the X-Men are after it because they think it might help them stop the Juggernaut. Juggernaut is after it because he doesn't want the X-Men to have it, and it might give him more power. And then there's like some businessman, I think, that's after it. So basically, it's a race, a battle for this jewel. It's a decent X-Men story, as always. Not a huge X-Men fan. I do like reading novels based on comic books, so I do read the X-Men stuff, and it's fine. It's a good comic book novel. Then we have Godzilla Returns by Mark Saraceni, and this was, I think it's the first in a series of Godzilla novels, and this one basically it's in the title. Godzilla comes back, wreaking havoc, and the main human character is a journalist that's assigned to the Godzilla story. And so if you've seen a Godzilla movie, you have an idea of what the book is going to be like. Godzilla destroying things and then leaving, humans trying to figure out how to stop him. Decent book. I don't have this one anymore, and they're very expensive for a decent copy online, at least last time I checked. I do have 2 of the books in the series. Unfortunately, this isn't one of them. And they're fine. The writing is not my favorite writing style. Mark Saraceni, his style doesn't grab me, but I do love Godzilla and giant crazy monster action. So they're decent books. They're worth reading. I reread one of the ones, excuse me, that I do have. I've reread it, and I'll reread the other one. And if I can find the other books in the series again, I'll read those again. But then we have Edgeworks 4, or Volume 4, by Harlan Ellison. And this, as with the rest of the Edgeworks series by White Wolf Publishing, contains 2 books. One is, I had to write all these down. These are long titles. So this single book, Edgeworks 4, contains the book Love Ain't Nothing But Sex Misspelled, and The Beast That Shouted Love at the Heart of the World. They're both short story collections, a gamut of different types of short stories from Harlan Ellison, who, as I always say, despite being controversial, was an amazing writer. Excuse me. And this does contain one of his most famous, most popular stories. It was made into a movie starring Don Johnson, and that is A Boy and His Dog, which is a post-apocalyptic novel about a boy and his dog and the things that happen to them. During the Apocalypse has a fantastic ending. The movie, not that great. I think simply because of the time that it was made, there are elements of it that I found very jarring in a bad way, very bad way. Something that could possibly be remade, which is a great story. But Edgeworks for Harlan Ellison. Then we have Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Angel Chronicles, Volume 1 by Nancy Holder. And this is novelizations of 3 episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer that feature Angel. He's a key element in these 3 stories, or at least his relationship with Buffy is. And the 3 stories that are in here are Angel, which is the episode from season 1 that where we discover who this mysterious stranger Angel is. And then Reptile Boy, which is from season 2. It's an okay episode in my opinion, and not exactly sure what Angel has to do with what's going on. I'm trying to remember if this is when he is Angelus. For those of you who are unfamiliar, I'm going to, real quick. Angel was a vampire. At the beginning of the TV show, he's this mysterious stranger who's watching out for Buffy. He's helping her with mysterious messages and stuff. They start to fall for each other, or at least she starts to fall for him. He's already apparently in love with her. We find out he's a vampire with a soul because of this curse. While he was a vampire, he was horribly evil, and he killed this gypsy girl, and so the Romani girl, but I can't remember if they say gypsy girl or Romani. Either way, it's Romani girl, and her clan puts a curse on Angel, and the curse is they give him back his soul, and so his real name was Liam, but he's going by Angel. His vampire name was Angelus. But because he has a soul now, he feels guilt for every evil thing he did as a vampire. And so he's suffering. But there's a little twist on the curse. And it's actually one of the dumbest things, in my opinion, about the show. Even though it leads to some great stuff, because I think Angelus, the evil version, much more interesting character than Angel. But so part of this curse was if Angel knows one moment of true happiness, he will lose his soul again and become Angelus. I think this is stupid. I understand they're like, well, we don't want him to ever be happy. But it's not like he knows that this is he does not know this is part of the curse. So, I mean, if he did, it would make more sense, because then he would try to make sure that he never knows happiness. But he doesn't know that this is part of the curse. And so in season 2, there's a point where he apparently having sex with Buffy gives him a moment of true happiness. He loses his soul, becomes evil Angelus again. I think the metaphor, if that's the proper term to use here, is that it's supposed to be when a guy, treats a girl real great, and then once they have sex, he's like, I'm done with her. Because the whole Buffy thing was supposed to be these monsters and all this stuff is metaphors for high school and all that. But anyway, so this is my rambling way of basically saying I don't recall if Reptile Boy takes place before or after Angel has become Angelus. And then the final story in here is an episode called Lie to Me, which I really, really like this episode. It features Spike and Drusilla, 2 great characters, and basically it's about this old friend of Buffy's, someone she knew from previous school, and he comes to Sunnydale, and he and Buffy are reconnecting. They're friends, but then you find out he's basically courting vampires. He wants the vampires to turn him into a vampire because he has a brain tumor that's killing him. And he ends up, spoilers again, if you're ever, the show's been out for a long time. He ends up getting turned into a vampire, and Buffy just waits by his grave. And when he rises as a vampire, she stakes him and kills him. And the title comes from Giles, Buffy's watcher, saying, you know, the world is hard. You're going to have to make tough decisions. I could tell you that everything's going to be okay and life gets easier and blah, 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 blah. What do you want? And she says, I want you to lie to me. But it's a really good episode, I think. But anyway, so that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Angel Chronicles, Volume 1 by Nancy Holder. Novelizations of these 3 episodes. It's fine. It's good stuff. If you're a Buffy fan, it's fine read. And then finally, all right, now I've got some books. Had to dig some of these out, but here we go. So, we have The Score by Richard Stark, a Parker novel, Parker the Master Thief. And this basically is Parker is putting together a crew because they are going to rob an entire town. It says they're going to clean out the plant payroll, both banks, all the stores in one night. So Parker's got to put together the crew, and he's got to keep on the crew to make sure they don't screw things up. Great stuff. It's Parker. It's Richard Stark, pen name for Donald E. Westlake. And it's just a fantastic heist novel. As most, if not all, of the Parker novels are. Great, great stuff. Someday, I'm going to do a reread of the entire series. I have all of the books. I have read at least half of them, but there are some that I have not read. And I'm going to just start from the beginning and not read them all just straight through, but read one, read some other stuff, come back, read the next one, etc. But The Score by Richard Stark. Then we have Spider-Man, Valley of the Lizard by John Vornholt. I really like that cover. The Lizard, my favorite Spider-Man villain. Come on, it's a human-sized lizard in a lab coat. What's not to love? You can see my little dusty, very dirty and dusty. I got my little lead-based lizard figure here. I have a lizard statue over there. Love the lizard. Anyway, this starts with murder. Spider-Man starts investigating the murder. It leads to the lizard. And the lizard, they end up down in Mexico. And the lizard's got another, I think he's got like an army of lizard people or something. And has a scheme to take over the world. Lizard is a very Jekyll and Hyde character. He's Kurt Connors, a scientist. He's missing an arm. And so he's studying reptile regeneration, and of course tests it on himself because it's comic books, and his arm grows back, but he keeps the arm is back, but it doesn't stop there, and he turns into a lizard man in a lab coat, which is awesome. And the lizard brain takes over, and he wants to wipe out humans. And then Spider-Man will defeat him. He'll change back to Kurt Connors. He'll feel horrible for what he did. But then things happen. He changes back to the lizard again, back and forth all the time. Crazy stuff happening. In the comics, that doesn't all happen in this book. But good stuff. Always happy to read anything with the lizard. And then the final book that I read in June of 1998, one of my favorite books of all time, a book I have read many, many times, a book I will read many, many more times. You're going to see eventually, if you keep watching these videos, if I keep making these videos, you keep watching. There's a point where I was reading this book every other month. I don't remember how long that went on, but it did go on for some time. But at this point, in June of 1998, the last book I read was A Prayer for the Dying by Jack Higgins. It's been on this list before. I've talked about it before. Stupid movie cover. That's Mickey Rourke. That's Bob Hoskins. I don't know who that guy is. Liam Neeson's in this movie. The guy that plays Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer not only is in the movie, but he plays a character named Giles. Anthony Michael Head. Something like that. Anyway, this A Prayer for the Dying, it is about a member of the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, who wants out after something bad happens. So he wants out. He goes to this guy. They can get him fake ID and everything he needs to get out of the country and just become somebody else. But he's told, well, we want you to do one more job. He doesn't want to do it. They send some killers after him. He decides, fine, I'll just do it and get this over with. So he's supposed to go to London. I think it's London. It's England. And kill this mobster who, like, every week at the exact same time goes to his wife's grave. So he goes and kills the guy, but a priest witnesses the murder. And so he goes to the confessional and confesses to the priest, so then the priest can't say anything. I don't think that's how it works. I know the priest isn't supposed to be able to say anything that's said to him in the confessional, but I would think he'd be able to go to the police and say that he witnessed the murder and describe the person that did it. He doesn't, even after the confession, he doesn't know the person's name. He should be able to tell the police what he saw. But anyway, so he thinks he's saving the priest by keeping him from being able to talk to the cops. The mobsters don't see it that way. And so now the IRA guy is protecting the priest and his niece, his blind niece. And the character's name is Martin Fallon, by the way. But I love this book. I saw the movie first, saw that it was written by a guy named Jack Higgins, got the book, read it, love it, reread it all the time. A Prayer for the Dying. Not a bad way to end June of 1998. All right, so that is it. That is what we have got. Question. Do I have a question for this video? Once again, I was not smart enough to think of a question ahead of time. How about, let's just throw this out there. Sort of two-part question. Do you have, and if you do, what is it? Do you have a favorite series of books? And I suppose, I guess we could say just 2 books or a trilogy, but what I'm really looking for is a longer series of books. So do you have a favorite series of books? And if so, what is it? And then what is your favorite book? Just flat out favorite book of all time. And so for me, it is difficult to say what my favorite series is. Since I didn't think ahead, I mean, there's so many great ones. Off the top of my head, see, I want to say like the Spencer series by Robert B. Parker, but I could say the first half of the Spencer series, because there's a point where I stopped reading them, and then Robert B. Parker died, and other people have been writing them, and I haven't read any of those. But I love the Spencer series by Robert B. Parker. I love the Parker series by Richard Stark. I've talked about the Fletch series before. Repairman Jack is fantastic. Whew. It's difficult. if I had to pick an absolute favorite, gun to my head. Plus, there's so many great pulp series. Oh, Hap and Leonard. I might have to go. Like if I was told I could only read one series for the rest of my life, I'm looking. You can see me looking around the room. I might have to go Hap and Leonard because they're definitely rereadable. Um, and they're still coming out, which is nice. So I think I might go with Hap and Leonard again. That's gun to my head, forced to make the decision. Absolutely love those books, but the other series I mentioned are all fantastic as well. Favorite book of all time? I do not have one. Um, I don't. It's not something I contemplate. I can't make that decision. Uh, Prayer for the Dying might be the book I have reread the most of anything. That was probably The Light at the End by John Skipp and Craig Spector, because I would reread that. I need to go back to it again sometime. But because of that whole reading it every other month, Prayer for the Dying might be higher. I might have read that more often than I've read The Light at the End. I love Early Autumn by Robert B. Parker. It's part of the Spencer series. The Resurrectionist by Rath James White. It's one of my favorite horror novels of all time. How do people pick favorites? I don't get it. I can't do it. I just can't do it. But I'm asking you to do it. So, favorite series, favorite book. That's what I want to know. Let me know in the comments below. And if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you care to follow me on other social media, as of this recording, I am still on Twitter, and it's at Ronin5757. If you on Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, it's Eric Smith 5757. I think that's it. I think I've done it all. So that's all I've got for you this week. Until next week, read more books.